Hello disciples, sorry if there's any background noise in this video. I've got a fan running under my desk because it's like 30 Celsius, that being at 86 for all you Fahrenheit users. Anyway, this video is a direct sequel to my last Serverblight video, where I analysed the Blight, the characters, the series themes, emotions, etc. In that video, I analysed everything from the first episode up till the events of Awareness. But now, with 2 more episodes out, I'll be covering them in 2 sections. I recommend you watch the 2 episodes, that being Proxy and Doubt, before we get into this. Anyway, starting off with Proxy, a Serverblight story, it's pretty straightforward, albeit it gives us a lot of information. Starting with the premise, it's 2 longtime friends living in the same apartment, studying and working there. One hasn't played TF2 in a while the other still does. The one who plays, named Mark, later becoming a victim of the Blight, and the other one is our protagonist. The protagonist allowing us to learn more about the Blight from another perspective. I won't be going through this whole episode beat by beat as to save time, instead I'm going over the major plot details and implications. First thing is we learn the story as a post from a witness who gives us exposition, who Mark was, details about his own life, setting up the plot, etc. We can also assume the protagonist survives this story as the whole thing is in past tense and he's posting it online to let people know what happened. Also, I do want to give a quick criticism of this actual writing format, it being in past tense and the protagonist being alive. It just immediately takes any risk out of the story because you know the protagonist is going to survive. That is my biggest gripe with the creepypasta writing style, and honestly, I blame Reddit for that. If I remember correctly, the creepypasta community on Reddit made it a rule that the protagonist has to survive for the story to be posted there. That single-handedly made the stories have no weight towards the protagonist whatsoever. That's if I'm remembering that correctly. But regardless, moving on. Second of all, Mark encounters the Blight-infected Blues standing around in Red Base and kills them, this probably being a failed attempt to ambush him. Taunting, we see a Blue Scout in the background, and we see the soldiers' cosmetics. Mark is playing as a soldier with the same cosmetics we saw the infected soldier in Awareness using, both when he mimics the Scout's taunt and is part of the amalgamate. Meaning the story is set before Awareness, and the post the protagonist is making could be how the Scout became aware of the Blight's existence in the aforementioned episode, and why he was so spooked upon seeing the aforementioned soldier, likely recognizing him from the post. Next, thirdly, the Scout just stands there and stares at him, menacingly, then runs away when followed, implying he's being lured in by said Scout. After this, the protagonist wants to play when he's free, and Mark messages, "You promise," a phrase he would later repeat when infected, which means the Blight is around and somehow able to read his direct messages. We know being around the Blight, even indirectly, slowly infects people and drags them into TF2, so the Blight may be able to see what he's saying indirectly, as I don't think there's any way for a player in-game to see another person's Steam messages, especially when those messages are not directed towards the user who's watching. Anyway, after that, he kills the Scout and get the typical being unable to look away from the screen and other symptoms of being indirectly assimilated, followed by them all staring at him, which implies the Scout led him into a trap as I suspected earlier, followed by Mark dying violently in the other room as he's assimilated, this showing us what the assimilation process looks like externally. Very clearly, dying by assimilation is extremely painful and violent, and described in detail when Mark is taken. Assimilation is followed with massive internal hemorrhaging, convulsions, laboured breathing, the arms being restrained to the keyboard and mouse. Victim gags quietly while choking on their own blood, writhes in immense pain, crying from the torture, head going limp and falling to the side after being touched, eyes clouded over like cataracts. Protagonist hears a voice behind him after touching Mark, and Mark spits out a last sentence, "Help me," which implies Mark is fully aware during the whole process and can feel all of it. He gasps a final time, body goes limp, and he passes away. That being an overview of what we see. However, while I'm not a medical professional, these are my medical notes from my observation of the scene. Firstly, cataracts normally form during older age as the protein in the lens of the eye naturally starts to break down and clump together, making it harder for light to pass through, leading to the distinct cloudiness. The wrists not moving, the arms being locked in place while the rest of the body convulses implies something is directly controlling the arms and keeping the victim trapped, which would explain why they also can't look away. The gagging and lack of vomiting implies the lungs are bleeding heavily internally. From what I can see here, the rapid bleeding and cloudy eyes imply rapid cellular death and protein destruction, as in the actual proteins making up the cells of the body are being rapidly destroyed by some process. The convulsions, arms being locked in place, and the victim being fully aware imply direct attack and control of the nervous system, primarily the spinal cord and bodily systems. Victim very clearly in extreme pain, so they're definitely conscious. And we also see later that those who are indirectly assimilated can feel the injuries they get in-game, meaning whatever this process is, it's directly binding the player's neurology to the character in-game. Which, side tangent, means Aaron can feel every time he rocket jumps and the explosion damaging his body, which implies he has either extreme pain tolerance or is just unable to respond to the pain. For elaboration on how much pain Aaron would be in, an explosion like that when rocket jumping would absolutely render the bones in the legs, meaning Aaron would feel his femur, pelvic bone, feet and shins all being destroyed repeatedly every single time. This also means getting gibbed would be insanely painful as the whole body is rendered into chunks. Anyway, this also implies that the blight itself has either carbon-based biology or something similar enough to interact with the human nervous system. If I had to guess the process that's going on, I can't guess the exact step by step, but I think the creature is using some kind of electrical process to bind the human consciousness to their TF2 counterpart, possibly subjecting the victim's neurology to extreme voltage, hence the electric chair comparison made by the protagonist. This would explain why the process is also so destructive. That level of voltage would literally break apart proteins, effectively cooking them, which you can literally see happen in the eye of a fresh fish when it's being cooked. They turn white. This would also explain the heavy bleeding as blood vessels and arteries are exploding inside the body, specifically in the soft tissues of the lungs, and the seizures the victim suffers during the process. Albeit the blight clearly has some sort of refined process going on, it's not just blasting the victim with 20 shitzillion volts that would definitely create a smell and probably even make them explode. No, instead it's directly applying the voltage in a controlled way that does not make the victim's brain literally explode as to preserve and transfer the consciousness. Meanwhile, the rest of the body is being literally just straight up burned up as it serves no purpose to the blight once the transfer is complete. A part of me maybe suspects that the blight intentionally destroys the victim's body, completely rendering it inoperable as to prevent them being transferred back. But anyway, that's my best theory on the biological process as I'm typing this up. Also, a new episode literally just dropped as I was writing this, so I had to go back and change some things. And I was originally going to say we'll see if that changes anything later, but no, it doesn't. Anyway, after Mark dies, the protagonist notices on the screen two large pale eyes pressed up against the screen watching Mark's body. They shift and look directly at him, implying the blight can look through a person's screen and see them in the real world, the monitor acting as a literal window. These eyes are close together, large and like eyelids, possibly having no iris, albeit in my opinion they look to have a very dark red one. Anyway, either these eyes are giant or super close to the screen's POV and look big as a result. Also, given how close they are and the lack of eyelids or even a nose, these are clearly not from a TF2 model or anything related to that. I suspect that these are the eyes of the blight itself. Weirdly enough, they look exceptionally human, which in my mind implies the blight is copying features from humans. Not just mentally, but physically. Anyway, after this, the protagonist runs out to call an ambulance, coming back and finding the PC is dead, implying the blight hid its existence after being seen. The ambulance comes, Mark is dead, he washes the blood off, contacts Mark's parents, and Mark is now supposedly in a coma and likely not going to wake up anytime soon. The protagonist struggles to explain what happened and has no idea how he'd even begin to, which is entirely fair given the fuckery that just transpired. He tries to move on, leaves, focuses on college, etc. But after all of this, he remembers, tries TF2 and enjoys it for a bit, only to run into Mark's account in-game, Sigismund 0. It tries to lure him in using a Steam message saying, "You promise," which was what he said when he just about got assimilated, which implies the blight knows how to use Steam and is aware of the fact it's in the game, as if it looking through the screen wasn't fucking obvious enough. The protagonist has symptoms of indirect assimilation. He can't move, he's locked in place and can't look away. He walks off into the hole in the middle of the map, hits the floor and dies. The protagonist feels his neck in pain as it crunches, and as I said earlier, the partially assimilated can feel everything. He also feels the creature releasing its grip when he disconnects and then shuts down his PC. Do note here that other players who disconnected felt this thing lose its grip as well. Also, it felt natural for him to keep playing before encountering Mark, which implies the blight has a direct effect on people subconsciously, even with its mere indirect presence. After, he uses Mark's account to spam message the protagonist in a loop of messages trying to bait him back in. The protagonist then has dreams about Mark, hearing him screaming and shouting for help. This implies his subconscious is now connected to the hive mind of the blight. Meanwhile, it's laughing. He also hallucinates it in the corner of his eye, but nothing is there. And then he explains that he's posting all this and hears whispers. It's Mark's voice, but not his words. All of that hallucination stuff implies that this thing has powerful psychic mimetic abilities and can mess with people subconsciously even after a single indirect exposure. And with that, all the key info from this episode is covered, so what do we learn? A few things. 1. The Blight clearly has powerful mimetic effects, directly and indirectly. 2. The Blight is self-aware it's in a game. 3. The assimilation process is violent, permanent, and implies this thing has a great comprehension of human neurology and psychology and is able to directly interface with it directly by some unknown mechanism, and is able to directly infect the subconscious of someone with a brief indirect exposure. 4. Once it becomes aware of your existence, you are totally fucking boned. It's going to follow you and try to find you by any means. Which would also explain how it found Aaron after the events of Thunder Mountain. Chances are, once you encounter it, it mentally tags you and can innately sense where you are. 5. People are now aware of the Blight's existence in some capacity thanks to the protagonist's internet post. This being a potential issue I initially mentioned in my earlier video the series had to address somehow. Because there's only so long something that big can remain hidden. So I'm glad to see it finally becoming a plot point. 6. The protagonist hears a voice behind him after touching Mark. This is the exact moment he got infected by the thing simply seeing him. This also means that touching someone during the process will infect and target you as well. And with that, that's all 6 points. As for the episode's themes and emotions, it's primarily about tragedy, losing someone you knew and being unable to comprehend the thing that did it while desperately asking for help. And all you can do is try to move on, only to keep being pulled back, which implies a theme of trauma. And with that, that's the events and information of Proxy covered. Now to cover the most recent episode, Doubt, which I literally just finished watching and analysing. The episode's pretty straightforward. Aaron Dix-a-Lot is playing on the control point map well. He's just playing TF2 normally, he rocket jumps, kills a medic, and quickly runs into a demo man on his team who he talks to, asking him if he's seen anything that shouldn't be in the game. Jagged X, the demo man, has no idea, which Aaron clarifies people who go off and never come back on. Dix-a-Lot tells him to turn off the PC if anything weird happens, and we get a Richter overtime ARG slop joke from the red medic, followed by a Sonic EXE joke from the demo man before they run off, which is a pretty fucking Kino moment. A train passes behind Aaron and a spooky blue demo man appears, Halloween style. This demo man being classic from Awareness but on the blue team. He asks, "How's your day, man?" a phrase he said in that past episode. Aaron hears him and turns around, which should not be possible in a standard casual match. Only in community servers where cross-team voice chat is enabled. Classic walks towards him, stops in the tracks, stares Aaron down, Aaron ready to blow him up. Classic temporarily regains control of his body, asks for help, and then gets killed by a fucking train before disconnecting. The Blight clearly doing all this just to fuck with Aaron. Followed by Aaron just leaving, implying the Blight let him go. Then we get text that tells us episode 7 is coming in the next 2 weeks, which will be soon as of uploading this probably, or my lazy ass already missed it, who knows. Which means all of that was just a trailer for episode 7, which considering how offline is a trailer for Reflection and not canon as the two deviate greatly and have plot conflicts, I expect this to be a similar case. So if this ends up not being the case in the future, just disregard this section of the video. But on the off chance I'm wrong, and this is literally just a chunk of episode 7, here is what it teaches us. The Blight has realized it can't catch Aaron and has resorted to just fucking with him. It can relinquish control like it did with Classic before he got hit by a train. Aaron's trying to warn people about the Blight, and the Blight can control if you're able to leave or not. It just letting Aaron leave. Which, if this episode stays canon, means the Blight has total control over its victims and how much control it has. It has a sense of priority, able to decide if someone is worth chasing. Aaron is spreading word of it and warning people, but he's failing to do so, which is probably getting people infected without him knowing. In fact, I suspect the Blight is willingly chasing but not infecting Aaron, and using him as a means to spread and seed new servers indirectly. And the Blight can decide if people are able to escape or not. Speaking of escaping, there is literally nothing stopping the Blight from making flesh walls or setting up traps at the cliff edges of maps, preventing people from escaping the map at all. Albeit considering how the Blight behaves, it's most likely intentionally slowing itself down as to remain hidden and study players for longer. Or, I personally theorize that it may be giving them a hope that it can snatch away later to catch them off guard. Because this creature definitely has the capacity to do that. It has the intelligence and resources to do exactly that. However, the actual assimilation itself doesn't seem to be the creature's goal. I personally theorize that it's playing with its food to maximize its opportunities, and learn as much about humans as it can, albeit in its own cruel and sadistic way. But yeah, anyway, with all this we can summarize what we've learned from these two videos. The Blight is far more powerful and has more control than we thought, its intelligence is greater than what we estimated, and there's no way of telling what it's truly capable of. But personally, if I had to guess, the Blight either has something big planned or is trying to stay low and avoid detection for as long as possible. all while studying its prey to further push for whatever its end goal could be. But in the end, these 2 episodes build on what the Blight is capable of, giving us a more complete image of how it works. However, a part of me suspects the Blight may be intentionally creating a false sense of consistency and will change out of nowhere, retconning all of this and throwing it all off. Because if the Blight is anywhere near as smart as I'm starting to suspect it is, that feels very in character for it. It will deliberately go through all of this to set up a false set of behaviors that we've estimated and studied, only for it to completely flip it on its head and do something completely out of character, throwing it all off. Which I honestly really hope does not happen, otherwise there's just no point in theorizing or attempting to understand it. Basically, if all consistency is thrown out the window for a plot twist, I'm not going to bother breaking it down anymore. The only exception to this I'll make is if it creates a new set of rules and no stay in place, then I'll bother trying to analyze. However, if the creature becomes inconsistent for the sake of being, in quotations, ambiguous, in quote, then we have a massive fucking problem. Will this happen to the series? Probably not, especially given the episode's description in which Durf mentions he's wrote the episode out and he's working on future stuff. But it's still something I'll keep an eye out for. But regardless, in summary, Proxy shows us the assimilation process externally and gives us some implied nature of the Blight itself, and more info on what it's capable of. And Doubt shows Aaron trying to warn people about the Blight while it continues to haunt him. And with that brings us to the end of this addendum. I'll keep a tab on the series, possibly dropping more addendums in the future every second episode or so. That way, these videos won't become a TLDR slop series and I can actually present things of substance. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for slopping by.